In November 2023, the magazine Exotica Moderne published an article of mine about Carrie Guild, a woman ahead of her time who inspired the name of the Mai Tai cocktail. Aloha and Yorana. I'm David Bartel, and in this video, I'm going to do an even deeper dive into this fascinating woman and her husband, Eastham. There's a lot of detail here, and also a few surprises. Maita'i Roa Ae, out of this world the best, is the legendary phrase that gave the Mai Tai its name, according to Trader Vic. The toast was made by a friend, Carrie Guild, who, with her husband Eastham, were visiting from Tahiti. Most of you already know that version of the story, but just who was this woman, and what do we know about the context of her gastronomic enthusiasm? Picture a lean, gray-eyed, well-off Boston woman reclining languidly in a blue blouse with mandarin sleeves and a dragon brooch, red slippers, smoking a cigarette in a long holder, or encamped on a dark Egyptian night wearing a tweed suit smelling of camel, imagining herself beguiling Rudolph Valentino, while just down the road Howard Carter was unsealing King Tut's tomb. She wanted for little, but longed for more, something exotic. I didn't care to be bound to any routine living, and so I wanted to escape, she said in her deep husky voice. In 1893, these people were born. So was Caroline Travers, at the birthplace of the ice cream sundae, into a New England family. Her father, Lewis, was a mechanic missing 3 fingers on his left hand. Commonly called Carrie, after an aunt, she was educated at Wellesley College, where she dabbled in theater and rode on the varsity team. Carrie married John Haywood of the wealthy family of furniture makers. The marriage lasted only a year, just long enough to have a daughter, Martha. Ulcerative endocarditis left Carrie a widow. Carrie promptly sailed away on this fruit ship to Cuba and through the Caribbean. Whether she crossed paths there with the tall, blue-eyed Eastham Guild she had met over tea, we do not know. At roughly the same time, Eastham, who went by Ham, visited Cuba with his wife of 10 years and 2 young children. Ham was a wealthy tanner and cotton broker who sailed Kennebunkport in his youth, and whose later travels had taken him across Europe and elsewhere. The connection between events is unclear, but Ham's daughter died of scarlet fever at age 9, just after the Caribbean trip. Within a year, Ham obtained a new passport and went to live in England and France with Carrie, abandoning his wife and son. Ham had visited Holland, and as a youth, Carrie had dreamed of the windmills and tulips of Holland and Hans Brinker, so they settled there in a home on a sand dune facing the North Sea. Carrie's parents visited them there, leaving one to speculate on the unusual family dynamics. What is clear is that Carrie and Ham were soulmates. In 1921, Frederick O'Brien wrote Mystic Isles of the South Seas, a travel book praised at the time as a current version of the Dream of the South Sea Paradise, an update to Melville and Stevenson by the most flamboyant of lotus eaters. O'Brien called Tahiti the merriest, most fascinating world of all the cosmos, and the Guilds were seduced by this idyllicism. In 1922, Carrie and Ham left Holland for Tahiti via Venice, Egypt, Ceylon, Singapore, Malaysia, and Australia. In tow were Carrie's 4-year-old daughter Martha, her nanny, a dachshund Max, and 42 pieces of baggage. Slipping into the port at Papeete in 1923, they discovered that O'Brien had beguiled them with an unrealistic dream. No, not that kind of dream. Instead of intoxicating tropical aromas, their senses were assaulted by the smells of copra and fish, bilge water, tarred rope, doorless hotel rooms, and outhouses. "What'll we do first?" Carrie said, and then answered her own question. "Go to the Circle Bougainville. Let's have a drink." It is telling that the first thing Carrie wants to do upon arriving at the port in Papeete is to venture to the social center so ubiquitous in O'Brien's yarns. Here on the cafe's 2nd floor, facing the port, were the famous rainbow cocktails, the Dr. Funk, arguably the first Polynesian cocktail, champagne, rum punches, which might be rum and whatever else, and endless colorful characters. Like O'Brien, the Guilds were bon vivants.
We drank heavily and fought over the women.
As an interesting aside, the last monarch of Tahiti, Pumaré V, died of alcohol abuse. He was especially fond of Benedictine and lies to this day in the shadow of that bottle. Unless you believe the rumor that his body was spirited away to the ancient burial site at the Tiara of Tahiti, but I digress. On a bicycle circuit of the island, James Norman Hall found the Guilds hunting for property along the coastal jungle. He and his Mutiny on the Bounty co-author, Charles Nordhoff, both living on Tahiti, would become friends of the Guilds. The Guilds built a 10-acre estate they named Te Anuanua, the Rainbow, which Carrie called the showplace of the South Seas, where she insisted that everyone dress for dinner. Here they thrived for 17 years, plunging headlong together into an array of hobbies from bridge to hard hat diving. If you can't buy it, make it yourself, she reflected. They built a 180-foot pier, bought half a dozen or so tiny sailboats, and started a racing yacht club, the world's smallest, Carrie mused. While they lived in relative luxury, with a car and a phone, the Guilds were hard-working, kind and charitable to the Tahitians, raising Martha among them. They hobnobbed with international celebrities, including Hollywood filmmakers on location in Tahiti, and even appeared as extras in the 1925 silent South Seas film Never the Twain Shall Meet. Yes, that's an accordion. In the days before guitars and ukuleles, accordions were everywhere in French Polynesia. A would-be actress in college, Carrie did not fit the image of the contemporary actress, so she practiced emulating the legwork of Charlotte Greenwood, the only woman in the world who could kick a giraffe in the eye. Carrie mused that in Tahiti she had created her own stage. The Guilds vacationed in Europe and the US every year via San Francisco. Starting in February 1934, they sailed around the world on the Fleshman's storied and opulent yacht with extended safaris in Africa. Yes, the Fleshmans of yeast fame. Julius Fleshman was a keen botanist, and he and the Guilds collected specimens of flora and especially exotic birds. Ham had a passion for aviculture. He writes, "Since 1931, it has been my pleasure to import, acclimatize, and liberate birds from other tropical and semi-tropical countries. Up to 1940, I have liberated some 9,000 in all, comprising about 54 kinds." Ham was not alone. This had been a common practice for hundreds of years, including the introduction of mynah birds to Tahiti in an attempt to eliminate yellow wasps. He succeeded for some years with about half the species, but in the end, only 2 thrived in the wild. Imagine you are a bird from a northern hemisphere continent trying to figure out which way to migrate on a southern hemisphere island. Tahitians expressed alarm at the sight of macaws peering in their windows or harassing buses, associating the strange creatures with ghosts. Ham also alarmed shipmates when thousands of mealybugs being imported from Florida escaped into the cabins. His aviculture work was published widely and is still cited today, though now expressing horror. For example, speaking of the nunbird or blue lorikeet, if the venerable Mr. Guild turned up with them today, he would probably be clapped into jail. Because the adorable Tahitian blue lory had long since vanished from Tahiti, Ham scoured nearby islands to capture birds for repopulation, though unsuccessfully. He personally brought scores to the UK in hopes that a wealthy aficionado could breed them in captivity. Only 2 perished on the 40-day voyage thanks to an experimentally crafted brew designed to replace their coconut blossom diet. This consisted of honey, unrefined brown sugar, and malted milk. If any mixologist is inspired to create a tropical libation with these ingredients, the name Bluebird of Paradise would be more than apt, and more appetizing than invasive species. Horticulture was Carrie's primary passion. An early riser, she tended their 10 acres of tropical gardens with tenacity, varying species, methods, and environments to aesthetic ends. A mass of glorious and variegated color, according to James Norman Hall. Many of her plants were imported. Of roses, iris, peonies, lilies of the valley, and fuchsia, only the roses survived. The locals dubbed her Pitate, Polynesian for jasmine. She also went by Mama Moo Cow to the local children, and Mama Ruau by her grandchildren. She gave imported plants out freely to neighbors and other importers, trading for species that she lacked. She led an effort to beautify the district, lining the ocean road with ornamental trees and winning the last French civil decoration to be signed before Paris fell in 1940, just days before. According to O'Brien, Tahiti was the Eden with no serpent or hurtful apple, in harmony with nature. There were no snakes, Carrie granted, but the Garden of Eden was full of Eves, joking about the powers of the vahines. Then a new passion struck both Ham and Carrie, big game fishing. This was thanks in large part to the Riders of the Purple Sage writer Zane Grey, the first millionaire American author who almost single-handedly invented the myth of the West. He was also the first to pioneer deep-sea fishing in the South Pacific and had a fishing base around the coast from Te Anuanua. I do not often take any novices under my piscatorial wing, Grey wrote, but these two were so eager, so sincere, so faithful. The Guilds bought a fishing boat from Grey, renaming it after Te Anuanua, and then ordered a new one, patterned after Grey's frangipani, which they christened Carrie Fin, after Grey's nickname for Carrie. Ham's nickname was Ham Fish. Ham joked that Carrie couldn't catch a fish when he wasn't there to tell her what to do. If he tells her what to do just once more, Grey said, he will find a gaff handle growing out of his head. Carrie had a positively fragile appearance, by one account, supposedly lacking the strength of her contemporary fishermen. In fact, she had once been a rower with strong shoulder muscles and could battle game fish for 5 or 6 hours, landing many of them. In 1932, she landed an 823-pound black marlin with the linen fishing line used in those days. This catch made Ripley's Believe It or Not and held a world record for many years. I was proud, she recalled. An Australian racehorse was thereafter named Carrie Fin, and Carrie donated an eponymous trophy that has been awarded to fisherwomen into the new millennium. Grey was so impressed with the Guilds that he included fictionalized versions of them in his posthumous novel, The Reef Girl, characters so thinly veiled that it is reasonable to read them as their real-life models. The character corresponding to Ham had an easy, nonchalant way, a light-hearted wit, and a melancholic air of resignation, perhaps over some old regret. Carrie's character was most gracious, cool and stylish, brilliant, stimulating, satiric, and well ahead of her husband. The Guilds never lived to read these flattering portrayals because the manuscript was rejected as too steamy by Grey's publisher and not published until just after Carrie's death. Worse, in 1931, Ham and Carrie had a bitter falling out with Grey, but in the end they reconciled. The Guilds paid Grey a birthday visit in California the year before his death. Touched, Grey wrote a sentimental letter saying, "The break in our friendship hurt me very much. If I had my life to live over again, I would change many things." He praised Carrie and opined that Ham had finally found himself. The Guilds were the society leaders of the island, according to one account, and tourists would find their way to Te Anuanua for the parties, outside the reach of the contemporaneous prohibition in America. A typical meal was the local poisson cru, which was fresh raw tuna soaked in lime juice and coconut milk, accompanied by pig, taro, breadfruit, exotic fruits, and light white wine. By this time, Martha spoke fluent Tahitian and performed traditional dances, both impressing and raising eyebrows of society columnists in New York during a visit. But with World War II emerging and reaching as far as the Society Islands, the viability of this isolated paradise became uncertain. The Guilds had to leave their secret of tranquility and peace, as Zane Grey put it. The last prominent tourist they entertained was composer Cole Porter, for whom they organized a show of traditional Tahitian music and dance at his request. A few years later, Porter would coincidentally write a musical called Out of This World. The Guilds returned abruptly to the U.S., leaving their belongings behind, from carved wood and stone tikis to booze. Carrie did manage to spirit away 25 cases of French champagne. In Honolulu, just before the attack on Pearl Harbor, Martha married into a prominent Hawaiian family. She single-handedly introduced Tahitian dancing to Hawaii on a nightclub table at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. Carrie and Ham resided in Southern California during the war years. Ham worked supporting the war effort, and Carrie was the head of the Los Angeles Red Cross Volunteer Registration Bureau. Good friends with Trader Vic, they hung out at Hinky Dinks, which had become Trader Vic's by then. One summer night of 1944, as the legend goes, true to her larger-than-life personality, Carrie gushed her immortal praise on Trader Vic's new drink with typical joie de vivre. Maita'i Roa Ae, out of this world, the best. The idiom out of this world seems to have originated in America only a decade or two before, so of course it is not a literal translation from Tahitian. Mai Tai means good, and Roa means greater, so Maita'i Roa means very good. The affirmation A means something like even better or isn't it, and from that you have the best. The Trader Vic website confesses that the common pronunciation of Mai Tai is incorrect. Mai Tai, Maite? We know that Carrie pronounced it Mai Tai throughout her life, but which is correct? Listen to how these Tahitian speakers pronounce it.
Maita'i Roa Ae. Maita'i Roa Ae.
Maita'i Roa Ae. Maita'i Roa Ae. Actually, the real word will be Maita'i Roa. But every time that you are saying like quite fast, you can say the A and E, A instead of I. So, Maita'i Roa.
Over the years, Trader Vic changed his story about who first said Maita'i Roa Ae. In 1970, he said that it was Carrie, and she agreed. One sip, she wrote, and my natural reaction was to say, Maita'i Roa Ae. But in 1973, Vic cited Ham. Vic's claim that his friends were from Tahiti was a characteristic stretch to add an exotic pedigree to his new beverage. Memories of alcohol taste testing are bound to be muddled, and both Trader Vic and Carrie sprinkled spice into their recollections. We'll never know for certain whether it was Carrie or Ham who came up with Maita'i Roa Ae, but from what we know of Carrie and Ham's personalities, and the account she repeated to friends and family for years after, our money is on her. One supposes that the beloved Frederick O'Brien also hung out with Trader Vic. His last years were spent as an alcoholic in nearby Sausalito, living with Jack London's widow. O'Brien first published the prescription for the Dr. Funk cocktail, of which Gauguin reportedly excoriated, Dr. Funk was a bloomin' ass for inventing a drink that spoiled good Pernod with water. Did the Guilds ever meet with O'Brien while in San Francisco? Did they ever see the smoked head of a Solomon Islander he kept in his closet? Carrie never wrote about such an encounter, and apparently she put Zane Grey off of O'Brien, so it seems O'Brien went from an inspiration to the Guilds to something of a running joke. While living in California, Carrie gazed from the window of her study, seeing not the neighbors' sheets on the clothesline, but sails billowing across the Pacific. She wrote an account of her Polynesian adventures that, while breezy, demonstrated her deep understanding of Tahitian culture. After the war, the Guilds returned to Te Anuanua for about 2 years. They once sailed aboard Thor 1, the ship that 2 years later would bear the original Kon-Tiki from Tahiti to San Francisco on its way to its current home in Oslo. However, Ham's health was declining, and they retired to Hawaii, finally getting married and living on the ocean near Honolulu. They entrusted Te Anuanua and Ham's birds with friend Jerry von Bergman. Carrie eventually sold Te Anuanua to friends, the Falkenbergs. She sold her fishing boat, Carrie Fin, including her rod engraved by Zane Grey. After 3 decades, Tahiti was finally behind them. In Hawaii, Carrie was a moving force in local garden clubs and loved to entertain as a gourmet cook. On one notable occasion, the Guilds threw a party for decades-long friend Howard Wright and team on the occasion of his navigating to victory in the 1955 Transpac race. Howard beat a yacht named Mai Tai in that race and inched out another called Jada, which he later bought. These ads appeared in the 1955 Transpac program. Ham died in 1958, perhaps from Parkinson's. Carrie moved from Oahu to the Big Island's Kona coast. There, she renovated a rustic oceanfront house bought from a man named Joe Beach, setting up several one-level buildings and a potting shed among some invasive but faltering kiave trees. The plot was so rocky that she called it Lava Lump. She planted various colors of bougainvillea in lava cracks she filled, transforming the property into a modern showplace. "That's my Kona Picasso," she said, watering hose in one hand and morning coffee in the other. Kona is the nearest thing to Tahiti that I found in the Hawaiian Islands. Specifically, Lava Lump was in Keauhou Bay, the Hawaiian aptly meaning new beginning. Carrie became the grand dame of the area. As a hostess, she loved to serve breast of chicken, sauce supreme, boeuf bourguignon, and fish lava lump, which was slices of fish with seasoned stuffing baked in white wine and sour cream. Every meal included wine and salad. "Use only the hearts of tenderest greens, leaving each leaf whole," she said in one recipe. "Never tear nor cut up salad greens." Desserts might be Parisian or crafted from the exotic flavors in the land we live in. I wonder if the tikis at the left are ones that Carrie reclaimed from Te Anuanua. In 1967, the wife of sailing friend Howard Wright passed away. Howard was a lawyer who had sailed since childhood, getting his first boat as a high school graduation gift in 1911. He served in the Navy during World War I. As an adult, he had sailed to distant locations to study bird populations, so he and his wife had a lot in common with the Guilds and had been lifelong friends. In earlier years, Howard had socialized with numerous celebrities. His son even dated Julia Child's sister. While sailing around Catalina, he weathered tempests between Humphrey Bogart and his third wife, Meo Mertho, and then the fairer seas of his fourth, Lauren Bacall. Howard and Carrie hooked up in a casual wedding in 1968, and Carrie sold Lava Lump to a developer. To my surprise, I discovered that I have stayed at Lava Lump. There I am, and have even had Mai Tais there. This is Lava Lump today, the Outrigger Kona Resort. Carrie moved with Howard to his home in Pasadena. The first thing she did was to swap out the twin beds for a king. "Time for our siesta," she would announce punctually every day. She wore a muumuu around the house, and their butler served Tanqueray and tonic with lime as a favorite, accompanied by bowls of macadamia nuts. She also favored the Queen's drink, saying, "Fill the glass with ice, then fill the spaces with Dubonnet." They lived the high life with gusto. On the same yacht, Jada, swabbed by the feet of Errol Flynn, John Wayne, and Marlon Brando, Carrie and Howard sailed happily into their sunset years. Carrie Guild Wright led an almost double life, alternately making society rounds and retreating to a rustic life in the undeveloped Society Islands, as far from civilization as one could be. As a descendant put it, she lived her life lustily with joy and curiosity, creativity and boldness, and a desire to create beauty in the world around her. To contextualize her out-of-this-world remark, note that she dined the world in luxury, with admirals and dukes attending and throwing lavish parties. She cooked from a Fanny Farmer book and had bowls of coffee from beans roasted and ground fresh every morning. She was fond of scotch and rum. She did not like the rainbow cocktail popular at the Circle Bougainville in Papeete, which is a bit ironic since the Guild estate was named Te Anuanua, Tahitian for rainbow. She complained that the cocktail was sheer sweetness and alcohol, an opinion from which we may surmise that she would not have enjoyed the many neurotoxins that are today hawked as Mai Tais. Although O'Brien mentioned the popular Dr. Funk cocktail dozens of times in his books, Carrie never once did, so one might guess that she did not like that drink either. The Mai Tai was not Carrie's only out-of-this-world taste. She once used the same phrase to describe the taste of varo, a sort of shrimp. While Carrie passed down a Mai Tai recipe to her descendants, she also invented a cocktail herself, back in her Te Anuanua days. "It has a rum base," she wrote, "tropical crushed fruits and dozens of fresh limes, also native brown sugar. You let the whole thing stand 24 hours, dilute with white wine, then pour the whole business over a block of ice. Gardenias float on top of the bowl for decor. There is only one thing left to do. push the gardenias aside and drink it. That sounds rather like it's channeling Trader Vic. An apt name for this ad hoc offering might be patate punch, which she would serve at lush parties on their pier, canoes gliding by, musicians playing in the light of the tropical moon. The drinking was copious, she said. Those were unforgettable nights. Having relished luxurious beverages all over the planet, Carrie had the creds to call a cocktail out of this world. She died on March 23, 1977, at the age of 84. But her infectious laughter, full of mischief, still flits between the trade winds, dances on the salty spray, and echoes in the toasts of merry Mai Tai drinkers everywhere. See if you can hear her the next time you toast
Maita'i Roa Ae.
Maita'i Roa Ae.
Maita'i Roa Ae.
Maururu and aloha.
Out of this world.